Two very interesting nuggets from Charles Robinson of Yahoo Sports as it relates to the 49ers. First, he writes, I think the Niners have been pounding high-end defensive line edge players in their workouts. It's obvious to a lot of teams to the point that I'm now convinced they're taking defensive line or edge at 11. I will leave the door open for a trade back, but I don't think there's much appetite at 11. Everyone always wants to trade back. The trade partner is the hard. You got to find somebody to trade back with you. This is exactly the situation the Niners were in last year at the end of the first round. And I said it yesterday. This is a richer version of last year for the Niners, where in an ideal world you trade back, but nobody wants to trade up. So what do? You just take a guy you like, and half the people are going to say it's too rich, but you draft as if you're at 16 if you can't trade back. So anyway, that might be what happens here at 11. But he writes, if Ashton Jeanty is somehow in that spot, then peg Denver as a team that would move up. So, that feels very unlikely. But if Jeanty is in that spot, it wouldn't just be Denver, you would think, that is clamoring. The other thing that was interesting, and if you've been watching this for a while, you know that I love UCLA linebacker Carson Schlesinger, Rhett Lewis, who's grinded the tape, talks to people around the league. I called 3 or 4 UCLA games last year. Rhett Lewis said, who was on my broadcast team, he said Carson Schlesinger has the best instincts in the draft. I should have pressed him. I was like, what about Travis Hunter? But anyway, in the conversation there, he said the best. But this is what Charles Robinson wrote. The buzz around Schlesinger flying up draft boards and landing as a first-round pick is a little overcooked. Of the 10 teams I spoke to, none had him rated as more than a middle second-round pick. Perhaps he blew some teams away, but Jahad Campbell was the only linebacker who had any consensus whatsoever as a first-rounder. Gives the Niners a shot at 43. I've suggested that even if he's not necessarily viewed as a first-round pick, if you're drafting near the middle or end of the second round, or even if you're 43 like the Niners, I don't think they would trade up. But a team like them in that spot, you go, we really want this guy. We should just move and get him. It'll be interesting. Do people think the Niners like him? I thought his pro day, his production was there. As Rhett pointed out yesterday, I thought it was a good point. He's only really he played linebacker 10 games. Because Oluwafemi Oladejo was the linebacker. They moved Oladejo to edge rusher so they could put Schlesinger in the linebacker. So he hasn't played a ton. But his athleticism, the way he tested at his pro day, really solidified his place. I'd be surprised if he's there, at like 50, if he lasts past then. My guess is he's going to go above there, I think, before the Niners even pick at 43. But this is interesting because he's right. I mean, it has felt like Schlesinger has some heat on him, and he says it's not necessarily the case based on who he's talked to. But as we know, he's talked to 10 teams. That's less than a third of the league. All it takes is like 4 teams to really like this guy and to know that somebody else likes him, and all of a sudden he's on the move. So a couple good pieces of intel there from Charles Robinson. By the way, sponsored by Puesto, Mexican Artisan Kitchen. Fantastic food in the Bay Area, in San Diego, in Orange County. I love it. Check out their menu and find the nearest location to you by clicking on the link down in the description. Thank you to Puesto for sponsoring. I know a lot of people like Teddy Buchanan from Cal. I was listening to Dane Brugler and Daniel Jeremiah talk about him earlier in the week, and but to me, you can get both of them if you want. Like Teddy Buchanan's not going in the second round. There's no question the Niners need linebacker. They need defensive tackle. They need a guard. They need, another guy whose name came up. And I said this, don't be shocked. I will not be shocked if the Niners go back to Kansas for an offensive lineman. A little later than they took Dominic Pudi, Bryce Cabledew, who played some tackle and is moving to guard. So just another name to keep in mind. And, the other thing I've been thinking about is what would be the most shocking pick you could think of in the top 10? And I haven't thought about a lot of the others, but I've thought about the Raiders at 6. And so keep in the back of your mind this. Who does it feel like the last player the Raiders would draft? Like who makes the least sense for them at first blush? And I think the answer to that is Tyler Warren. Why draft Tyler Warren when you already have Brock Bowers? Or could you imagine if you drafted Tyler Warren and paired him with Brock Bowers? But Guy, what about the Niners? With the Niners, Tyler Warren's kind of redundant. Why isn't he redundant with the Raiders? Niners have other mouths to feed. The Raiders really don't. You start thinking about Chip Kelly and getting a little wild and what he could do if they had Brock Bowers and Tyler Warren. So I've been cooking on that one for a little bit, and I will hold my breath on Thursday when the Raiders get on the clock. I mean, you combine the historical unpredictability of the Raiders, the wild, like I don't need to pander to anybody. They've got two coaches, the head coach and the offensive coordinator, who don't give a rip what anybody thinks about him, what Albert Breer would write about him, anything. They don't care what we'll say about him. Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, those are two absolute I do what I want guys. So that's not a rumor. That's not a report. But you go through so many draft machinations, you start thinking like, what's the craziest thing that could happen in front of the Niners? And you start thinking about that one. I don't think you have to go too far to go, well, it might just be crazy enough to happen.